All right, let's finish up Chapter 11. We talked about educating clients one-on-one in the last video. This time we're going to take a look at when you're dealing with a group of people that you're talking to in reaching out to a particular company or organization. The big difference between educating one-on-one and educating to a group is that with a larger group, the education process typically has to be a presentation rather than a discussion. As much as we've talked about how we're not really talking about a presentation step in selling, it does lend itself more that way when you're dealing with a group of people. This more formal approach focuses the group's attention on your content, and it does limit discussion. So there is a bit of a negative in that way, but you can still use this group presentation sort of scenario as an educating step. Now let's talk about the preparation steps for educating a group of people. First, again, conduct pre-meeting research. Now, it looks a little different depending on what you're doing. If you're doing missionary selling, if you're reaching out to somebody for the first time, you want to know who the decision maker is. You want to know their personality as well as knowing things about the business. If you're dealing with service selling, where it's a renewal or perhaps you're dealing with an advertising agency, you want to know what the biggest concerns are from those that you're going to be talking with. What hesitations do they have, which is generally going to be why you're going to be doing some sort of an educating, presenting step with these folks. If it's a renewal and maybe there's been some issues, those are things that you're going to want to research and make sure you have solutions on. For the case of the advertising agency, it may be just more about proving your particular medium or your particular media outlet. You want to be able to answer the who, where, when, and why questions. Let's take a look at each of these individually. First off, who should give the presentation? Should it be you? Should it be the sales manager? Should it be the owner of your media outlet, or your president or your vice president? Who should receive the presentation on the client side? As best as you possibly can, I should say, you want to try to match title with title. So if the head decision maker at a company that you're trying to present to, if you're talking with the vice president, see if you can have a vice president with you when you go from your company. Try to match, make it apples to apples. Now, the where question. If possible, give presentations in your offices because that gives you home field advantage. You can control the environment, you can control the timing. You know how different things work within your office as far as, if you're going to use a computer to show a presentation, that sort of thing. Now, if you're presenting at their offices, you want to check for those logistics. Do they have the ability to put a presentation up on a screen? Do they have computers available? Can you hook yours up to stuff that they have? Do you need to bring other stuff with you? Might not also be a bad idea, especially if you're dealing with a larger group, to arrange for refreshments that you can offer before or after the presentation. The when question. Give your presentation during the prospect's advertising planning cycle whenever you possibly can. If they set their budgets for advertising on an annual basis, meet with them prior to them setting that budget. If you know that they're planning for a special seasonal emphasis, make sure you connect with them significantly in advance of that emphasis. If possible, shoot for a morning presentation rather than an afternoon presentation, because assuming that we're dealing with people working first shift, you're going to find people are more alert in the morning and not dealing with that afternoon sluggishness, which can affect their ability to comprehend and their tolerance of a presentation from you. The why question. Define your specific objectives for that presentation. You want to have 3 general objectives. You want them specialized for each presentation, for each client that you're doing, but generally you want to be able to introduce your medium. you want to inform and educate about your medium, and then you want to persuade them that your media is a good fit for their advertising. So introduce, inform, and educate, and then to persuade. Then you want to create your presentation. We'll talk a little bit more about the particulars of that in just a bit. Plan handouts to go with the presentation. Especially if you're dealing with a smaller group, you may not necessarily want to have handouts if you've got like a large group of more than 25 or 50 people. That can get a little cumbersome. But with a smaller group, it gives them the opportunity to have something in their hand that they can take notes on in addition to the stuff that you are presenting to them. And it can actually help to foster conversation in those smaller groups. Next, plan to control the environment. You want to give those who are receiving the presentation the best seats and put them all together, especially the actual decision makers. Put them in the middle of that group so that you can focus a lot of your attention on them. Make sure that you are talking directly to them as much as is possible. And the message you want to convey is that your focus and that your complete attention is on the audience. If you've got other people with you from your office, have them off to the side. Have them kind of quiet during the presentation process, or perhaps they have a specific role to perhaps be available to people that want to ask a specific question and not interrupt the presentation or something like that. But make sure that the people in your group are not being a distraction or taking your attention away from the potential clients. Finally, before you get to the presentation venue, make sure you rehearse it. Go over your slides. Go over the notes that you have. Make sure everything is in sync, that everyone's on the same page with what is happening, and take things from there. Do some tweaking if necessary, but make sure that by the time you get to actually doing the presentation, that you've got plans for a well-polished and well-presentable presentation that you're going to make. Now, let's talk about creating the presentations. First stage that you're going to do is do some writing. When you write a presentation, you should begin with a list of all the points you want to make, and then combine elements and narrow down the list to 3 key points. When writing, you want to keep in mind the rule of 3 and use it throughout your presentation, because basically most people are not going to remember more than 3 things. And if you're trying to cram too much information into a presentation, it's going to be ineffective and people are just going to tune out. Try to keep it to a maximum of 3 main points and emphasize those things in the beginning of your presentation, at the end of your presentation, and throughout the presentation. Make notes about how you want your audience to feel at various sections of your presentation. If there's points where you want people to create a sense of identity, or maybe have some empathy or have some excitement, make sure that you plan for those things in your presentation and do your writing in such a way that you've got a good chance of eliciting those kinds of responses. Thirdly, you want to write for the ear, not for the eye. You're not writing a paper, you're essentially writing a speech, a demonstration speech, where you're using different tools to help you with the things that you are communicating. As you do that, you want to tell a good story that people want to listen to. We hear things differently than how we read them. So make sure the things that you are committing to paper, that you are going to commit to speech, are things that are going to be attractive for someone to hear. Now, some rules for writing. First, the audience is the hero of the story, not you. So you want to focus on the customer when you are writing your presentation. Don't talk all about who you are, what you do, and all that. I mean, you need to share some of that, but the stuff has to be of impact to the audience that you're speaking to. Make the presentation about them. Second, follow the classic familiar structure of a story. You've got your three elements. You've got your hero, you've got your problem, and then you've got the extrication. The hero, in this case, is the audience. The problem here is kind of that antagonistic issue that they're trying to deal with, the problem that they're trying to solve. And then, of course, how the solution is able to come out through advertising, through your media outlet. Rule number 3, introduce the antagonist early in the story. This clearly shows that you understand the prospect's or agency's business and problems, and that immediately establishes your credibility and expertise. And sometimes you may even introduce the problem before you introduce the hero. Think about the dramatic aspect of the presentation as if you really are telling a story, because in essence, you are. Fourth, offer a solution to, an extrication from, the problem, and tell the audience why you are the best qualified to provide the solution. Show how your company's mission aligns with your prospects or agency's mission. Show how your business and their business are complementary to each other, that you are able to provide them with the things that they need to get their message across and get it out effectively. Rule number 5, insert case studies. Share the success stories for all the reasons that we've previously talked about. Sixth, you want to summarize. When you get near the end of your presentation, again, keep your summary to 3 points, the same 3 points that you've been talking about throughout your presentation. And then conclude with a call to action. It's important to follow up the call to action with a vivid picture of the potential reward. The call to action should leave the audience with a sense of what could be. If you are looking for X result, then let's take this next step of setting up a time to go over a proposal. That would be one example. Once you've done your writing, you need to go back and look at it, make adjustments, do some editing. Edit on behalf of the audience. Again, it's not about you, it's about them. Keep in mind that the concept that you never want to give a presentation that you would not want to sit through. Don't make your stuff boring. Do we need to explain it any more than that? And then number 2, edit ruthlessly and keep only simple, jargon-free words. Keep in mind that the people that you're talking to may not necessarily be an insider in terms of various terminology and things that you use in your office. So make sure you're putting things together in layman's terms and using simple words that are easy to follow and especially easy to listen to. Then there's the sketching process. This is planning your slides, designing your slides. And when you do this, you want to keep a couple of things in mind. Number 1, you only want to put one idea on a slide. In other words, don't do what I do with the lecture slides. You want to make sure that you only put one idea on a slide. You want to make it very easy to read. You want to make it very simple. If you use graphics, they should be just accents put on as a backdrop. They shouldn't be distracting to the people that are viewing the slides, so don't make things too busy. And then you also want to make sure that if you can, use pictures in such a way that they replace words, because pictures can communicate ideas a whole lot better. That old saying, a picture is worth 1,000 words. Choose the right picture, it will say a whole lot for you. When producing your presentation, generally you're going to want to use PowerPoint, especially if you're taking your show on the road and you're using their equipment. Just about everybody has PowerPoint or a PowerPoint equivalent, something that can interpret PowerPoint files. The one thing here, when you're making your slides and putting everything together, use lots of white space. Don't have a lot of clutter. Again, make things simple when you're putting your slides together. Now, we get to delivering the presentation. Before you begin your PowerPoint presentation, make opening remarks that deal with questions like, should I take notes? Can I ask questions? How long will the presentation take? Give the logistics and the details of what you're going to do at the beginning. It helps people get into a certain frame of mind. You can also address the issue of how you want questions to be handled. If it's okay for people to ask questions while you're doing the presentation, or if you prefer that they hold them until the end. So, set the stage for what's going to happen during the presentation. Never, ever, never, ever, 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 never, ever, ever just read slides. It's okay to emphasize certain things on slides, but you want to create a narrative in such a way that makes it so that you are vital to the presentation. If all they had to do was listen to you read the very things that are on a slide, they don't need you. They know how to read. So don't do that. Add some personality, add some things that complement the things that you are showing on the slides so that it makes the presentation engaging. When you near the end of your presentation and get to your conclusion, you want to make sure that you have a bit of gusto at the end of it, so don't waste all of your energy at the beginning. You want to make sure that you have a dramatic attention-getting opening, but you also want your conclusion to be memorable. So turn things up a little bit. Turn up your passion. Make your appeal as emotional as you can without being overly dramatic. Keep it real, but make sure that you include an appeal to the emotional element of people. And do that while you're asking for that possibility for a deal between your company and theirs. Then you get to afterwards. Once you're back in the office and you're kind of assessing how things went, make sure you do that debrief. Go over your script, go over each slide, make sure that things were on point. Is there anything that could have been said better or done better? Take into account the reactions of your audience as you were making the presentation and make some considerations based on that. Because quite honestly, if you don't do that and take an objective look at what you did, be willing to critique yourself, to make adjustments, to analyze the things that have happened, then you run the risk of not being able to improve what you are doing and to do even better the next time that you go out there. We're done. That's chapter 11. So finish up your notes and your study questions, fill out the survey. Were there some things that you hadn't thought about when it comes to presentations before? Some of these tips are good, not just in the sales world, but for any sort of thing that you're trying to do in the public eye or for a specific audience. So maybe we can talk about how those things relate to other things that you may want to do. Well, bring your thoughts to class. We'll talk about them.